My name is Hannah Jo, and I'm the host here that gets to welcome a new guest every week. And tonight we have Dr. Kathy Gruver. Welcome. Yeah. She's a coach, a speaker, an author, a multidimensional being, and tonight she is specifically going to be presenting about the internal family systems. So she'll be leading us through some interactive pieces throughout her workshop for us to do some self-inquiry, and my guess is identify some of these internal systems within ourselves, and then we'll group back together again to do some dialogue together. Open it up to the audience for any Q&A, and that will seal in the evening. So before we flow into your presentation, Kathy, is there anything that you would like to say to set context? Or
No, I'll cover it as we go.
Sweet. Well, I'm going to join the audience, and I'm going to turn on my listening ears too.
So the first thing I want to talk about is what are parts? We all have parts. These come from Jungian archetypes, and there's multiple ways that we think about this. So Watkins and Watkins called this ego states. We have Schwartz, who's huge right now with his book No Bad Parts, talking about internal family systems. It's parts work in hypnosis. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, and it's resource state therapy with Gordon Emerson. And I started learning this about 7 years ago, and I learned it first as ego states, so I'm going to refer to it as ego states. So we all have parts, and they are formed in childhood. They are formed when we need to have a defense, when we need to fit in, when we need to feel loved, because one of the basic needs that we have as humans is to fit in and to feel loved. So I don't care how great your family was, we all faced conditional love. Why aren't you as good as your brother? Why did you get a B plus and not an A? Why did you not do better in that sports performance? Whatever it was, we all had conditional love. And we all strive not only to fit in, but also to have that love from our family. So a lot of our parts were formed for that. The parts are also formed to protect us from trauma. And this doesn't have to be big T trauma. This could be little t trauma, which we've all faced. Maybe you turn around in the grocery store as a 5-year-old and your mom disappeared for a second. That's traumatic. We think they're gone. Maybe they showed up late to pick us up in kindergarten and we now feel like we've been abandoned. Sometimes it's really big T trauma, which we're not going to tap into tonight because that's a whole nother journey. We have an unlimited amount of parts. We normally have about 10 to 15 that we see most often, but we can have up to 100 or more parts. When I have sat down, I've done mapping for years, I think I'm up to 98 parts. Now, we don't see these often. There's normally 10 or 15 that we see most frequently. And these are actually hardwired into our brain. These are not psychological constructs. These have been mapped out with MRIs and with imaging, and they are real things that have different personalities, that can have different handwriting, that can have different sexes sometimes, different genders. These come out of the need, again, to protect ourselves, to fit in, to be loved, and to protect sometimes from other parts of ourselves. One of the really cool things that came out of Schwartz's work and the way he got into this was he was working with young ladies with eating disorders. And he found that specifically he would talk to these women and they would say something like, a part of me thinks I'm really fat, but another part of me thinks I look okay. And a part of me is binging and then a part of me is purging. And he started to go, wait, am I dealing with like DID? Is this multiple personality disorder? And he realized it wasn't. And we've all said that. Man, a part of me really wants to go on vacation and a part of me feels bad because I don't want to spend the money. A part of me really wants to ask that girl out, but another part of me is scared she's going to say no. We all talk about parts hardwired into the brain. One of my favorite examples is Chandler Bing from Friends. I have to say now, may he rest in peace. He was the jokester, right? He was the comedian. He was the jester of the group. And that came out of not only a need to dispel hard situations, but to fit in, to connect, and to relieve stress and things that were heavy when they cropped up. So that was one of his main ego states. And that probably came from childhood. Most of them did. So that sort of class clown that we had in school that we were faced with as a kid, that was an ego state that was forming for them. Again, these are not psychological constructs, and the difference between DID, or previously known as multiple personality disorder, and this is we are aware we have these other parts. We know that we're different around our kids than we are around the guys at the bar, than we are around our parents, than we are around our boss, or hopefully we're different in all those situations. Someone who has DID doesn't know that they have these different parts. They might wake up in the morning wearing a lipstick color that's not theirs, wearing a wristband from a club they've never been to, and someone's calling them Mary when their name is Jane. They are not aware that they have these other aspects. There's typically one guiding part, and the rest are satellite parts that do not know the others exist. The difference with this is we know we have them. We know we have these masks we wear. We know we have these different hats and outfits that we put on. And the more we get to know them, then the more fully we know ourselves, the more regulated we are, the better we are in relationships, communication, and leadership. So there's different categories of ego states, and I want to go through these because in a little bit we are going to map some of these, and if you know the categories, then it's going to be easier for you. So we all have managers. We all have managers because we're all here wearing pants, and we got here, and we put gas in the car, and here we are. So the managers tend to be the main part that we have. If you start to map out your parts and you don't know where to go, pick a manager, because we all have them. Another one is our biological parts. We all have to eat, we drink, we sleep, we reproduce. We have these driving urges to exercise, to move our bodies. We have pleasing parts. We all have pleasing parts. We want to please each other, we want to help each other, but we all know that person whose pleasing part is a little too much, and they start to put everybody else among themselves. And they discover this when they've signed up for their 30-second bake sale, and they go, oh, I don't want to keep doing this. But there's a part of them that feels included, that feels liked by pleasing other people. And it can really inhibit their life and their happiness. We all have protectors. Most of our ego states are protectors. We have protectors that, again, protect us not only from the things outside of ourselves, but also from other parts of us. And we'll get to that in a little bit. We have vulnerable parts, or exiles. And Dick Schwartz talks a lot about exiles and releasing those exiles. We're not going to get into that tonight. That is a deep subject. That is a lot of coaching or therapy. But the exiles are those little hurt parts of ourselves. There's those little kids that are feeling shame or feeling abandoned or feeling frightened or feeling threatened. Those exiles are the little kids that were bullied in grade school. It's the little kid who is scared of the uncle because that one time he scowled at them. The exiles are these little parts of ourselves that we want to protect. And so often, because they're so reactive and they're so scared and they're so filled with shame, we shove them away. We put them in a box, we shove them into the basement, and the protectors do everything they can to keep those exiles from coming to the surface because they disrupt the whole system. We all have depressed or sad parts, those emotions. We all have rebels. We all have rebels. And when I say that to like corporations, I see people go, we don't have a rebel. Of course we do, or you'd still be sitting on your parents' lap. It's the rebel that jumps down and like runs across the room and goes to see if they're allowed to be doing that. And hopefully if you're creating a child with good attachment things, you say, I'm right here, go ahead. It's the rebel that picks up the food off the high chair and goes, and the parent says, no, and the kid goes, and throws it anyway. They are starting to exercise that rebelness. And rebels can be especially good at helping protect us from things and helping us function in this world. We all have distractors and firefighters. In our real waking world, firefighters are great. They are the saviors, right? In internal family systems, firefighters are not, I'm not going to say bad because there's no, like Dick Schwartz says, no bad parts. But the firefighters are the reactive ones. The firefighters and the distractors are the ones who turn to drugs, who turn to alcohol, who turn to cutting, suicide ideation, hair pulling, porn. These are the parts of ourselves that get reactive when the proactive parts can't handle it anymore. We'll talk about those a little bit. We have spiritual and guiding parts. We have worry parts, the parts that keep us up in the middle of the night with those what ifs. We all have nurturing and helpful parts, and we all have striving parts. And it's an unlimited, like I said, pretty much unlimited amount of parts that we have. Sometimes we think we have 5 or 10, and then when we start to really break it down, we realize there's different aspects of parts, because parts lead to other parts. And once we start to map this out, you can see these trails of how they can just, this triggers this, triggers this. In fact, I'll give you an example. So you come home from work, you're really hungry, your body's telling you you have to eat, but you had a really bad day. So you would like ice cream. Ice cream sounds really good. Your happy pig is so excited to just have ice cream, sit on the couch, do the thing. Your manager comes out and goes, look, we talked about this. You're a responsible adult. You can't have ice cream for dinner. It's bathing suit season's coming. You have to fit into those clothes. You said you were going to work out. And the judge comes out and says, see, you're a loser. You're stupid. I knew you couldn't do this. I knew you were too weak to do it, which makes you feel like crap. Your little shameful kid comes out and goes, yeah, I probably am too weak to stick to this diet, and it always happens, and you start to have these feelings when you were a little kid, and you were teased or bullied or picked on or shamed. Then that happens, and you're like, yeah, see, I'm just a fat pig. It's never going to happen. I'm never going to be thin. And then finally the rebel comes out and says, fuck it, we're having Haagen-Dazs for dinner. And at this point, someone usually says, were you at my house last night? This is how quick this changes. Without even knowing it, we're switching from state to state to state to state. And we've all seen this, like we've all been in a bar where people are just having a regular conversation and a pretty girl walks in and all of a sudden, the guys get a little bit louder and I made $1 million deal yesterday. That's an ego state switch. And we've all looked at people and gone, where did that come from? Like you were just like such a normal person a second ago, and suddenly you were angry or jealous or way over flirty or way overconfident. It's those ego states that at the bar we go, yeah, I absolutely want to go skydiving. I'm in, man. We're going to go tomorrow. And then you're sitting on the edge of the plane going, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is stupid. I don't know why I agreed to that. Ego state switch. I do smoking cessation with my hypnosis, and I have people call me and they're like, I'm ready to quit smoking. My wife can't stand it. I'm going to get cancer. The smell is driving me crazy. They book the appointment. They walk in and go, well, I bet if I could just have 1 pack a day. Ego state shift. The one that called me for the appointment is not the one that showed up to do the thing. And I have to wait till I get the right state back, or the hypnosis isn't going to work. So as we start to identify these states in ourselves, you're going to discover these. So depending on which method you use for this, whether it's internal family systems, parts work, they have different ways of explaining kind of who's in charge. So you can look at it sort of like a house. All these different states are sitting in the basement, and every once in a while one pops up into the living room and takes charge. You can think about it as a classroom where you have the self, the teacher in the front of the room, all just like this. All the states are out there doing their thing, and you've got the very attentive ones in the front, and they're ready to learn. And then in the back, you have the rebels, and the ones that don't want to be seen, and the ones where the teacher's like, okay, well, we'll just leave them back there until they pop up with something to say. The other way to look at it is the bus. Who's driving the bus? I mean, we even use that term, right? Who's driving the bus? Who is driving the bus of your life? It's probably one of your ego states. So I'm going to give you a couple examples from personal life because it's just the easiest way to relate to this. Right now, I'm speaking to all of you, right? So I'm in the middle, Kathy, self, that's me. And then you have the speaker expert part of me. If you didn't have the speaker expert part of me, I wouldn't be standing up here. If you were only getting the speaker expert part, it could be very boring. Because we've all seen that speaker where it's like, blah, 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 PhD, click, blah, 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 PhD, click. Very boring. So you're also getting sort of my gesture performer, because if you weren't, it would be very dull and very boring. However, if you only get my gesture performer part, it's stand up and you're not learning anything. And I've also seen speakers get so carried away with being funny that all the audience is kind of going, I don't know what he's talking about now. You also have my librarian office clerk, who kind of sits right here. Now, his job is to glance at the clock, make sure I'm sticking on time, making sure the handouts get passed out, making sure the slides move, making sure I don't break this thing, and taking notes if the jester says something funny. Because this is how the comedy came out of my talks, is I'll say something, everyone laughs, and that part of me goes, write that down for next time. And I have to remember to kind of put that in organically the next time. The other part you're getting, let's face it, I'm standing up here speaking to you. I'm vulnerable. And there's that little kid part of us. It's like, oh God, I hope they like me and people are smiling and that's good. And oh, there are people here. There's a lot of, I hope someone shows up. There's that part. Now, if I lead with that, also not going to be a real good talk. So at any given time, you're kind of experiencing the flow of all of these states when you're dealing with me right now. Now, notice that in the middle, I said self. Self is the goal of this. Self is us with no state on. Self is us not blended with any part of ourselves. When we talk about psychedelics and ego dissolution, this is what we're feeling, that connectivity, that alignment with the universe, that connection to everybody else in the room. I like to equate it to the old paper dolls from like the 50s and 60s, or even Barbie, right? She's not wearing anything. There's just this neutral form. And then we decide what we want to put on it. Is it Army Barbie? Is it Princess Barbie? Is it Prom Queen Barbie? Is it Malibu Barbie? Which is what I grew up with. We get to decide what outfit we want to put on at any given time. And that's called being blended with those states. Self is these 8 things. Compassionate, creative, courageous, clear, curious, confident, calm, and connected. One of the most important ones of those is curious. As soon as you are truly in a state of curiosity, then you are in self. As soon as you start to feel, so you start thinking, or you start judging, or you start second guessing yourself, you know you're out of self. Self does not have an opinion other than these 8 things. He describes it with these 8 C's, which when I go spontaneously in my office, I can only ever remember 5, and I always remember a different 5 every time I say it. But yeah, just I am, just that being. It's the beingness, right? It's you in meditation. It's the mindfulness practice. It's us in the psychedelic place, in that pure consciousness is the self. Okay, so I want to share a few examples of how this works. So top left, roller derby. We all know what roller derby girls are. I was at a conference in Las Vegas. I was speaking for a naturopath convention. I was done speaking for the night. We had our little wine and cheese mixer. I was heading up to the hotel in Vegas to go to sleep. And I remembered that we were sharing the hotel at this point with a roller derby conference. So we had naturopaths and roller derby girls. Fascinating time in the lobby. I get in the elevator, I'm exhausted, I'm speaking the next morning, and I hear this commotion outside the elevator, and all these roller derby girls try to shove into the elevator. They think it's going to be hilarious to see how many they can get in the elevator. They don't realize I'm in there already. So I'm now pushed up against the back of the elevator. They're shoving in, they're shoving in, they're shoving in. They've got bottles of Jack, they're screaming, they got music playing, and we finally get about 23 people in this elevator. The doors squeeze shut, the elevator drops about 2 feet, the alarm goes off and we're stuck. And I could feel in that moment, I had 2 choices. I could be like, oh, this is going to be a blast. This is hilarious. This is going to be a funny story in a couple of years. Or I could go raging bitch. Well, raging bitch won. And I went, this is ridiculous. I can't believe you're stopping in here. And I just went off on these girls. And one guy, I don't know how he got in there. And I suddenly hear, oh my God, there's somebody else in here. And I'm stuffed up against the back, and they're taking selfies, and they're drinking booze. And so somewhere on YouTube, there's a picture of this fun party and me in the back going, finally, the doors open, and me being very important, I shove past everybody, and the fireman helps me out, and I was furious the rest of the night. Ego state shift. And I could feel it coming on. I could feel I had the choice of who do I want to be in this moment. And at this point, I hadn't studied this yet, so I didn't even know it was a thing. The second one, tax audit. If you've ever been audited by the IRS, I'm so sorry. If you haven't been, I really hope you don't. Because I was in the midst of, they wanted to see an entire year of taxes. Not 1 or 2 things, the entire year. And this was a very nerve-wracking thing for me. My pleaser was like, I'm going to get in trouble, and what if they think I did something wrong? And So as the day of my audit, as I was driving down State Street with a box of documents and binders and charts to show how I did my taxes, I was meeting my enrolled agent, and I realized, I need to bring my A game. I need to bring my badass self. I blared 9 Inch Nails, drove down State Street to the point where if I stopped at a light, windows on buildings shook. And I'm screaming, and I'm swearing, I'm banging the steering wheel. And I walked out of the car, and I'm like, hi, Kathy Gruver, here for my audit. The audit took 25 minutes. Because I was so, ready to show this guy what I did. Third one. I've done 2 TEDx talks. My second TEDx talk was in Los Angeles. I left Santa Barbara at 3 o'clock to drive down to LA on a Friday night. And that morning, my dad had been not feeling well. He had just come out of the hospital, and they determined that he still had pneumonia. We all knew he still had pneumonia. You could hear on the phone that he still had pneumonia, but his doctor sent him home. He called his doc, wheezing, and said, I don't feel great. The guy said, look, go back to the ER. That'll be the best way for you to get admitted, and then we'll deal with this pneumonia. So he talks to me in the morning. He's like, I'm sitting at the ER. I'll let you know when I have a room. This was back in Pittsburgh, 3-hour time difference. And there have been times where he's been to the ER where he literally sat there till 7 at night waiting for a room. So the fact that I didn't hear from him, it wasn't a big deal. Driving to LA, and I'm starting to think, boy, he doesn't have a room yet? That's ridiculous. And just when I'm about to pick up the phone and call his girlfriend, Carol, she calls me. And I said, oh, hey, Carol, I was just about to call you. Did my dad have a room? And she said, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm in the car heading down to my TEDx talk. What's up? She goes, are you sitting down? And my smartass went, in the car, kind of the only way to do it. And she goes, Kathy, I'm so sorry, your dad just died. And I went, oh, shit. Because that's not what I was expecting. That is not the call I expected. And she started crying, and she said, I'm sitting here with him, and I don't know what to do, and I have to make these decisions. And I said, Carol, I'm so sorry. I can't do this. I have to go do my talk. My dad would have wanted me to do the talk, and if I get roped into a conversation with you, I'm emotionally gone. I'm an only child. My mom died young. He was it for me. And I knew if I kept this conversation going, it wasn't gonna work. I said, what do you need from me right now? She said what she needed. I called a friend. I said, my dad just died. Called my ex-husband. My dad just died. Couldn't stay on the phone because if I got roped into it, I was gone. I showed up to the location, found the organizer, and I said, hi, I'm Kathy Gruver. I'm going to say something. Don't respond. My father just died. Don't respond. I'm going to do my talk, and then I have to go. Can't stay. Please don't tell anyone. Because if I start getting I'm so sorry, I'm gone. She goes, okay. And I occupied my time. I folded programs. I helped with lighting. I organized stuff. I got on stage. I did my talk. They laughed. They cried. It was fabulous. I said, thank you very much. I handed off the mic. I got backstage, and I collapsed on the floor in a heap of tears. And everybody who did not know what had happened thought, oh my God, how bad was her talk that she's now crying on the floor? And so I shared with the rest of the speakers what had happened. And what was fascinating is the men went, couldn't have done it, would have had to cancel. And the women were like, good for you, which was really interesting because you think, the women are the emotional ones. That's not how it happened. But I was able to shift into this space where I knew I could get this done. And I knew I had to. Then I fell apart multiple times. So meet Capricorn. Capricorn is my main ego state. She's fabulous. She's allowed me to run my own business. She got me my PhD. She organizes trips. You do not want her with you on the trip, but she will organize it. And if something goes awry, call on Capricorn. She's organized, efficient, a go-getter, hard worker, goal-oriented. She's a leader. She kicks ass until she's judgmental. She's a workaholic. She's type A. She's anal retentive. She's controlling. She's cold, and she's manipulative. The perfect one to be in the elevator with the roller derby girls, the perfect one to get me through the tax audit, and the perfect one to do my TEDx talk when I couldn't do it any other way. She was born out of the fact that I was horribly bullied, teased, picked on, beat up from about 5th grade through my senior year of high school. And it happened usually when I was still. Study hall, recess, lunchtime, in between classes, on the bus. And so Capricorn thought, if we just keep busy, if we just keep doing more and more and more, fill it, they can't get to me. And only child, parents wanted me to be perfect. We want the best for our kids. My parents wanted me to be perfect. And when they realized I wasn't perfect, they were so quick to point it out. So I thought, if I could just be perfect, if I could just do more, if I could get another degree, if I could get another A, then they'll finally love me. Very unconscious. We're not thinking these things consciously. So Capricorn still believes that I'm a 10-year-old and that I'm going to get beat up on the playground and that my parents still don't love me. And so she pops up times she doesn't need to. She can get a little too big for her britches. And again, all of our parts are positive, even the ones that society says are bad or that we deem negative. The cutters, the suicide ideation, the drinking, the sex addiction, all of that is a part trying to help us. So when I identified what Capricorn was afraid of, which is if she didn't do her job, I'd be hurt, I went, well, how can I help that? And I found the little exiles that she was protecting, and I helped release those little parts. We're not going to do that today. That's a process. But that's Capricorn. She's a manager part. She's great. Capricorn has become a verb in my house. My husband and I talk about parts all the time. It's the greatest way to relate to each other in a relationship, because I'll come home and I'll be kind of distracted. I'll go, oh, do you need Capricorn before we eat dinner? Yes, it's become a verb. Oh, look at you Capricorning. We just got a new cabinet for the kitchen, and there's all these drawers and things, and I went, oh, I get to put stuff away. And he goes, Capricorn is so happy right now. And I was like, yes. So we know each other. I have a little kid part. We all have a little kid part. Sometimes we just get to play. And I remember texting him one day and saying, I just need to let you know, my little kid part is feeling really neglected. And he said, I gotcha. So we got home, I finished Capricorning, and he pulled out the Play-Doh. And we played with Play-Doh for like an hour, and it took me a while to let that go. Oh, I'm getting it on the carpet, and why does his look better than mine? And it was a while before I could let that go, and next thing you know, we're just doing snakes, and we're little kids. It's the greatest way to relate, because if a part gets ignored, it's going to start to act up. Just like a regular family. And that's why Dick Schwartz called it this, because he realized the family system, the family therapy that he was doing, all those characters that you're interacting with and pleasing and arguing with, it's the same thing inside of ourselves. So that was Capricorn. Now, handout time. We're going to get in touch with some of your states. We're not going to go too crazy deep on this, but the form is elaborate, so this is homework for you. We want to know what the state is. And you can do that a couple ways. You can either go by the category, manager, little kid, joker, happy pig, eater, whatever it is. Or you can go by what it likes to be called. Not what you call it when you're judging it, but what it really wants to be called. Capricorn, though I am a Capricorn, just likes being called Capricorn. That's just what she likes to be called. I had a client come to me and she said, Kathy, I can't seem to get off the couch. I've just been so depressed. I just sit on the couch with a bottle of wine and Netflix. And I said, close your eyes and let me know who's sitting on that couch. And she closed her eyes and she goes, lazy ass. And I said, really? Lazy ass? Does that part want to be called lazy ass? And she goes, probably not. And I said, I wouldn't want to be called lazy ass. If it wants to be called that, that's great. Embrace it. She goes, no. She closed her eyes again and she goes, oh, it's 14-year-old. And I said, what does 14-year-old want? And she said, 14-year-old does not want to adult. She had just lost her husband after a long battle with cancer. And the last time she adulted, she buried her husband. 14-year-old didn't want to do that again. 14-year-old was a little boy, actually, even though she was a woman, wanted to sit on the couch with the wine and the Netflix. And I said, well, let's heal that. Maybe you can negotiate with this 14-year-old, and maybe once a week he gets to sit on the couch with the wine and the Netflix. Maybe not every night. And so we kind of negotiated with that part, which you can do. And 14-year-old was happy with one night a week and was like, great, I'll give you the rest of the time to do what you need to do. So what does it want to be called? And if you know what it does, my manager, I know exactly what Capricorn does for me. And then what it's afraid of if it doesn't do its job. These are some of the things we want to uncover. So identify 3 parts. So I'm going to have you do that on the form. Write down 3 parts. Sometimes it's, manager, mom, organizer. Maybe it's critic, scared one, anxious one. Maybe it's pleaser, da-da-da-da. Either write down sort of the category of it, or if it has a name, write the name down. So you can pick roles that you have often, and again, name them by either what they do for you or what you think their name is. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. I had a client that I was doing some exile releasing with. His house burned to the ground when he was 9, and they got out in enough time, and when the firefighters showed up, they tried to tap into the fire hydrants, and they froze. The water was frozen. So the entire neighborhood stood there watching this family's house burn to the ground. And I said, well, what were you doing at that time? We went back to his little 9-year-old self, and he said, well, we went over to a neighbor's house. He said, and I was kneeling on this love seat, looking out the window, watching my house burn down. And I said, well, what would you rather have done? And he said, I at least would have wanted to turn away and maybe we could all sit on the couch and huddle. And so I took him back to that point, and I had him sit on the couch with his family holding him. And I said, how's that little part feel now? And he said, so much better. This is how we start to heal those parts. And then the protectors that were keeping that little part away from everything else can start to back down a little bit. So the next part of this is pick one part that seems to be the most important for you, like I did with Capricorn. And what is its role in your life? Like you just said, what critic does, right? It tells you something before someone else can. What does it role? What does it do? How is it helping you? And then what is its positive and negative traits? Like I did with Capricorn. And they all have positive things, and they all have, again, quote, negative things. Okay, so anybody have one driving part that they came up with that they know the positive and negative traits for it? Yeah. Kim? Yeah, I got it right. Okay. Performer, yeah. What's it do for you?
It makes people happy. Mm-hmm. It buys me inclusion and acceptance. And it creates for me a sense of safety.
Mm-hmm. And where does it get too big for its britches and kind of backfire?
It turns into resentment, abandonment of self, not getting my own needs met, and exhaustion for always being on.
Yeah. And do you know where that came from?
Definitely childhood. I'm a Capricorn too.
Ah, yes. I knew I liked you. My Capricorn sees your Capricorn.
Right. The people pleaser, just to make sure that I stayed safe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And the more you build on that, you can start to figure out what does the performer, what are they afraid is going to happen if you don't do that? Because it comes down to either we're not going to be loved, we're not going to be accepted, or we're going to die. Because at a very base level, we want to fit into society. Because if we are kicked out of the tribe, if we're kicked out of the cave. We're not going to the Motel 6. We're not stopping at 7-Eleven for a snack. We're dead. So we have this very innate need to feel loved, to feel connected, to feel accepted. And if we don't, it triggers all these very deep wounds. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have a driving one that they want to share before I head on to the next segment of this?
Jester.
Ah, the jester, yes.
So I tend to stoke up the group and get them dancing. And that's what I did as a kid, because I was the oldest in the family. So it was like I was put in that place right from as early as I remember.
And is there a time it kind of backfires on you, or it gets too big for the circumstance?
No, it can be misconstrued as immature or not caring. It depends on who's doing the reading.
Yeah, interesting. What is it afraid will happen if you don't hold that job anymore?
I feel like I don't have a job or no purpose.
Yeah. So that is such a good point, and that's a great transition into the next thing. So we can't just eliminate protectors. We can't just get rid of them. Because so often people are like, oh, if I could just get rid of these protectors, I could go straight to the exiles. We can't get rid of them. They're always going to be there. We can just give them a different job. So when I started to release the exiles that Capricorn was protecting, I said to Capricorn, what would you like to do instead? You must be exhausted, protecting me all the time, achieving so much, checking off the to-do list. It must be exhausting. What would you like to do now? And she said, I want to sit in the tub with a book. And I said, great. Let's put you in the tub with a book. And when I need you to fix the travel arrangements, to put together the furniture, to do the next class, then we'll pull you out of the tub and you can do that, but on your terms. And she said, oh, that sounds so good. This is what we get to do with those protectors. We get to reassign them. We can't sneak behind their back. We have to ask them for permission. This is so important. We're going to get to that in just a second. So thank you all for playing with that. Fill out the rest of the form. I encourage you to get a journal. What I did is I got a beautiful journal from Chaucer's, local bookstore shout out. And on each page, I wrote the name of the part and something about it. And every once in a while, I'd hear this, but what about me? Oh, geez, I forgot one. Okay, and this book is full. And it tended to be like little kid parts that were like, but hey, what about this one? And what about that one? And I wrote them at the top. I have this whole journal of parts. And as I'm releasing exiles, I'm seeing these parts get less severe. I'm seeing them get less intense. And then my relationships are better, and I'm not as stressed, and I don't feel as triggered by things. Because again, parts trigger other parts. We see that in couples. I was doing something silly with the cat the other night, and my husband said, don't do that, because he's trying to protect the cat. But it was really triggering for me because I felt like a chastised child, like I had been scolded. And it really caught me off guard because I don't remember having that exile before. And it was like, thank you for doing that, because I just discovered a part of myself I didn't know I had. And who knows what has built up over the years to protect that scolded child. And it was triggering for him because he didn't want me harming the animal in the house by feeding it cheese off cheese fries, which was probably a stupid move. But it was tasty. It was tasty. So your homework. Here it is. What's it afraid of at work? Less. Why does it exist? When does it take over or get out of control when it shouldn't? Because the jester does that too, right? The sort of the Chandler Bing jester. There's times that we can't have jokes. You're in a very serious conversation with someone and they crack a joke and you're like, now's not the time for that. You know. So they come out sometimes when they're not needed. Your goal is to, it sounds like a video game, free the exiles, reassign the protectors and access self. We have to release these exiles. Please don't try to do this yourself. Please don't sit down one day and just start trying to release exiles, because if you don't get permission from the protectors, it can backfire. And in No Bad Parts, Dick Schwartz talks about this, where he did a session. He helped another therapist do a session with this woman. I might get the details slightly wrong, but they released this exile. She walked out of the office feeling great, and a couple hours later called and said, I'm suicidal. Because the protector went, you didn't ask me if that was okay. You just let this little kid go who I'm trying to protect, Imagine if you come home and your safe is blown open and all your stuff is gone. Someone's taking care of it, but they didn't ask you if you could do that. They were very upset by this. And so he had to kind of damage control this whole situation because the protectors weren't in on the plan. So reassign the protectors, can't get rid of them. Assure them that you're not going to try to get rid of them because they will kind of be like, I need to be here. And then come from that place of self. Self, those 8 C's again. Compassionate, creative, courageous, clear, curious. Ways to get into self. Meditation, breath work, sleep. If you're in a state that you can't get out of, take a nap, go to sleep, take a shower, walk in nature, meditate, breathe. Give yourself a timeout or psychedelics. Because psychedelics do a couple things for us. So the psychedelics provide us with neuroplasticity. So for a couple of days till a couple of weeks after using the psychedelics, you're in a space where you can learn. You're more tapped in. You're more open to that reconnectivity of those neurons. So now is a time to start doing the parts work. Now is a time to get into self, look at those protectors, map this out. Psychedelics also help you tap into those exiles because the protectors are tamped down a little bit. The last journey that I did, I ended up releasing 5 or 6 exiles. Now, I went in specifically to do that. I asked permission of the protectors. I did a lot of prep for that. I did a lot of journaling for that. And there was a lot of blending of the parts coming back to me and a lot of exiles that weren't too horribly beaten down were able to just sort of come back with me. Because when we release an exile, there's 2 choices. They get to stay in that situation healed. You get to stay on the couch with the family, hugging while the building burns down behind you, or you get to come be an adult. And so often the exile wants to come with us. They want to come be an adult. They want to be part of us again. And then you have to check in on that occasionally. Don't accept the part and then ignore it, because that's not going to work. That's going to be just the opposite of what you want to do. Like I said, it calms down the protector so we can safely get to the exiles to help them heal that wound that they are faced with. And again, please ask for permission. And they also brings you back to self. That ego death that we have, that connectivity with the universe, that connectivity we have with each other, the psychedelics help bring us back to that part. Please work with a guide. I'm not trying to drum up business, but if you're going to start working with exiles and protector parts and you want to do the healing of that, make sure it's someone who can help guide you through that. And that's what I do with my coaching. I do pre and integration with psychedelics and all that stuff too. Parts are softened and easier to work with psychedelics. You're usually unblended. So you're not wearing any of the hats of those parts. It's just pure you. So you can deal with this in an easier manner. And wholeness comes from that integration. This is how we start to become a whole person, less triggered, less reactive, less acting out. It brings together those parts, reflect on the process, and then process what arises, which is the great way to do this with the psychedelics. So, who am I? Each of us is a brain and an athlete, and a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. For those children of the 80s, that's Breakfast Club. And if you think about that movie, it's the perfect cinematic illustration of ego states. You have these 6 completely different people with wounds shoved in this room. And at any point during this movie, each one pops up with its strengths and helps solve the problem. And then in the end, they're all blended. Perfect illustration. I brought some books. They're in the back. They're $10 and $15. Journey of Healing. I know you're not supposed to have a favorite child. Journey of Healing is my favorite child. It's everything I know about health and wellness with some personal stories thrown in. Conquer Your Stress. It's about 45 stress techniques. Conquer Your Stress at Work, though it says at work. Not really at work. It's just the 5 techniques I teach during my talk. I have a great book on communication, which I just sold out of. But if you want it, it's $10. I can drop it off to you once they're in stock. And I have other programs. I teach about stress, communication, overcoming resistance to change. I do a conscious leadership program. I do one-on-one coaching, couples coaching, teams coaching, psychedelic coaching. And that's me. You can check me out on the Fire and Earth podcast too. And I'm so happy you're here. And I know we're going to have a great conversation and then do some questions. So thank you so much for being here.
Do you want to share a bit more, or will you please share a bit more about your journey?
Absolutely. So I'm a hypnotherapist, and I was at a hypnotherapy conference also in Vegas. And one of the masters of hypnosis, and he's probably forgotten more about hypnosis than most people know, named Mike Mandel, who's an incredible human being and probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, did a workshop on parts. And all I knew is he was amazing. I didn't know what the subject was, and I showed up and he pulled up these cards and he started talking about them and how he was able to use hypnosis, because hypnosis in parts work is also great. Use hypnosis to help people get to those wounds and help people heal stuff and not be as reactive. And when he started talking about this, I was like, wow, this is like really cool. So of course, Capricorn, I ran out and bought like 20 books on the subject, and I read every single one. I'm highlighting it, and I started doing the work. And then I did a bunch of courses. I did a course with Dick Schwartz, and I did the first segment of internal family system stuff, and just have been working with it since. And sometimes it's the right time at the right thing. And I don't remember hearing it before. If I had, it didn't resonate with me. But it was that moment in his talk where I went, wow, this is like a life-changing thing, and I have to do this. And so I dive deep on things when I get zinged by it.
Yeah, totally. And that was my assumption, and I relate to that. Like, my most pivotal spiritual and self-growth experience was actually through a yoga asana practice. So then I was guided to become a yoga teacher, and that was the earlier part of my journey. And so I always acknowledged that, like, oh, you're probably here because that was a thing that impacted you and was pivotal to the degree of now you have to focus on this and share it.
And it explains so much. Like, it made sense why things would trigger me that I didn't understand, and why sometimes I'd have these huge reactions that I went, why did I just act like that? Like, why did I start yelling? Why did that trigger me in a way? And it explained so much about my own life. And the elevator and the tax audit, none of that happened after I learned internal family. I just knew that this was a thing that I had to do. We feel like we have these different parts, and this kind of explained it in a way where I went, yeah, we can work with this now. Because it's great to know you have it. If you don't know what to do with it, then it kind of just dies there. And so this gave me sort of language to what this was, and a method of further healing these parts that I didn't even know were there.
Yeah, and seemingly a method to give yourself grace as well. Like, you haven't directly said this, but I see where self-forgiveness is also potentially involved in this work.
Yeah. Well, and also recognizing that all the parts are helpful. Society says we shouldn't overdrink, we shouldn't do drugs, we shouldn't look at porn, we shouldn't, this society shames us for these things. And Gabor Mate just did this amazing film on trauma. And he's talking about homelessness and addiction, and how these wounded parts of ourselves from this horrible trauma is what leads to that. It's not a failing of self. If anything, what a success. Because the addiction has pulled you out of that trauma in a way that you can function in the real world to the best that you can. It's such an incredible movie. And it just, we're seeing more trauma-informed therapy and trauma-informed coaching. I do that in my practice as well, because we all have trauma. And it just depends on how it ends up acting out with those ego states. So everything I'm learning, I love that everything I'm learning just sort of like melds into this one bucket of, oh, this feeds on that, and feeds on that, and feeds on that. It's so exciting to me. I totally nerd out on that, obviously.
Yeah. No, I very much understand like what you're describing, and I have maybe mentioned this before, but when we start to develop greater self-awareness, we shift out of that reactivity or that default state and into more responsibility, where we have enough space to choose. And I feel like that's also what you're describing, when those bigger outbursts and public activations started to lessen when you became aware of these parts. It seems like you just had enough space to be curious about an alternative and not just falling into the default that maybe was an unconscious expression and like easy because you didn't think twice about it, but ultimately had some sort of social or relational impact that was challenging.
Yeah. Well, and it's so true because, like I said, couples trigger each other. And when you recognize, oh, wow, I've just triggered their hurt little kid, and they're reacting by yelling at me, or they're reacting by shutting down, or they're reacting by, you can have compassion for that and recognize, Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Pain bodies fuel on each other. And when you recognize, oh, wow, I just triggered their pain body, you have the ability to go, now, how do I not further shame them? How do I not further build that angry part up? Because sometimes we get so blended with the part we're lost. Capricorn, and I lay this out with the cards, Capricorn goes to crazy lady. Crazy lady is exhausting. It's the, I don't know where my purse, and that can last about a half an hour, and then I go, And I totally shut down. And to my partner, he doesn't like to see me shut down because that triggers something in him of, oh God, is she upset? I need to help, but I can't be helped. I have to let that play out. So we've had long conversations about, when you get like that, what can I do? When you get like that, what can I do? And it's strengthened our relationship because we understand each other's triggers. We understand those parts and how they relate to each other in a couple. And it's just so great to have that language because there's a level of understanding that we get each other. Because of just who we are, but also because of the work that we've done with this system. And it's kind of magical. You know, I mean, I've had so many couples sitting on the floor going, this triggers that, and the other partner goes, oh my God, I've seen you go through that. I didn't know what it was. Wow, I get it now. And they know how to help them manage through that or get them into a different part. I remember I had just lost, I was very, very good friends with Dr. John Cravioto, the chiropractor here in town, who died from a brain tumor. And it was hard for me because we were really close. In the morning he died, I had to go to work. And I had done my little bit of grieving in the morning, but I was still kind of in a state, and I'm standing outside trying to regroup. And my husband comes out, and he puts his arm around me, and he goes, so if you were going to change something in the yard, what would you change? And I was like, oh, well, you know what I would do? I think we'd get a walkway, and I got into this creative space of what would I do with it. Now, I don't think you did it on purpose, but he was able to see, wow, she's in a state that she can't be in right now because she's got to go do something. What can I say to pull her out of that and get her into a different headspace? And it was magic, you know, and this is what you can do knowing how this works.
Yeah. It feels like a very, golden opportunity that you're offering us to review our relationships, whether that is an intimate or romantic committed partnership or otherwise, but those people that we interface with some sort of frequency, like, are our greatest mirrors and teachers for us to learn about ourselves. And it's actually through the very skillful and precise communication where we can learn each other and support each other in our growth. And I feel like similarly to people who are pioneers in the psychedelic space, there's this complementary new pathway of more intentional relationships.
Yep.
And there's this old paradigm of you meet someone, you fall in love, you get married, blah, blah, blah. We all know that story. And now that commitment and depth of love can still be present and alive, but infused with this desire for self-development and spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the internal family systems and psychedelics have been powerful tools for you. And I thank you for sharing your passion with us tonight.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
And so were you interested in exploring psychedelics before the internal family systems came into your field?
No, I'm newer to psychedelics. I think my first psychedelic experience was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I had always wanted to try it. I was in a relationship that was very stifling in that way, and it was not a safe place or a permitted place for me to even explore that. And as soon as that relationship ended, I was like, oh, wow, there's so many things I can do and try and experience and explore. And so there was just this, after being so suppressed for 20 years, there was this poof. And it was kind of cool. And now to be in relationship with someone who wants to, explore that with me has been amazing. And then I'm just finishing up my psychedelic coaching training for the integration and the guiding, and so I've begun to help others explore these beautiful resources too.
That's amazing. And congratulating you on the finalization of whatever that program is. And when you're tuning into the vision of supporting more people through psychedelic preparation, journeying, integration, who are the individuals or people that you're most excited to serve in that space?
Yeah, psychedelics sort of equal, to me, psychedelics equal exploration. So those people who, I have a client right now I'm helping integrate his ketamine experience. And he and I have done years of internal family systems. And because we've been coaching for so long, I almost sort of forgot about that aspect. And so when we went back and started reviewing his ketamine journey and he started referring back to old ego states, I was like, wow, like there was impact there. Like he's carried that forward. That was so exciting for me. And when I have done journeys, I've specifically gone, what ego states do I want to deal with? What exiles do I want to help? So I think helping people explore that is great. I love helping people with prep. What are your intentions? What is that set and setting? What questions do you need to ask? What questions do I need to ask you that you might not have thought to ask yourself before you go into this journey? Because coaching, whether psychedelic or just life coaching, it's all about those powerful questions. And sometimes somebody else asks us a question that we never would have thought to ask ourselves. So I get a lot of, that's a really good question. I don't know. And it causes people to take that pause and think. And then we can, put that into the little bubble and take that with us through the journey. And then, tell me about the journey after you're done. I want to help you integrate that. Because we all have these amazing experiences, and then, well, what do you do with it? You have this incredible thing, and then you're sitting with it, and you're like, and you just sort of toss it aside because you don't know where to put it. I'll help you put it someplace.
Yeah. And I like that. I saw that in your presentation. It did talk about coming into wholeness. And to me, that's my current understanding of healing, and like why we do the healing work is to achieve a greater sense of wholeness within our internal landscape.
Yep.
And it seems like this parts work is a very valuable method to bring all of those fragmented aspects back to wholeness.
Yeah. Well, I think the original Greek root of the word healing was something for wholeness, I think, is what healing meant. Yeah.
Well, I also wanted to inquire, for folks who participated in the worksheet, they may have come to some new information about themselves. So is there anything that you want to offer with how they can be with that new information, or maybe how they can bring dialogue with their partner or a friend about that information they just discovered about themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just about getting curious. Again, I wouldn't dive in and go home tonight, I'm going to release exiles. I wouldn't do that. Please don't do that. That's going to be too much for your system to handle. But just like in let's say an office building or a team or any sort of relationship, to change the system, you only have to change one part of the system. So the more you get to know these parts, and I think it's really just about asking those questions. And as soon as you start to write it down and explore those parts, more of them are going to pop up and go, hey, but what about this one? Hey, but what about me? Write it down. And then you get to dig further with that. What are the pros and cons of it? Where does it show up where it shouldn't? When does the funny one show up in the middle of something where everyone's trying to be serious? And sometimes it works because they're like, oh, levity, and sometimes they're like, dude, not the right time. Me saying to my dad's girlfriend, I'm in the car, sitting is all we have to do. That was probably not the right time to say that, but I didn't know the news that was about to be delivered. I think on some level I did, but I was trying to shove that down. So yeah, just write it out. The more you know those parts, just like anybody, right? I mean, if I say tell me something about everybody in this room. You guys don't all know each other. It's going to take some time to talk to each individual and get to know them. What do they do? What do they value? What role do they have in your life? And the more you get to know all of these bits of yourself, then the more healing can happen. And then you can get to work with someone to uncover those. What are they protecting?
Yeah. I'd like to make a generalization and say that everyone here values curiosity and has a desire to come together in community and explore the evolution of our consciousness through hearing new ideas from folks like yourself. Sweet. Well, I feel like I would like to turn to the audience and see if they have any other questions for you.
So what about doing parts work in community?
In community, like in groups?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's fabulous. That's what I did accidentally with the bachelor party, because they all shared, right? And as I was walking out the door, they continued to do the work, and the groom, who didn't know why I was there, kind of stood there and cried and said, "I feel like I know you all better than I ever have before." If you're in a safe place to do so, to do that sharing, yeah, I've done this in groups. I mean, when I do workshops longer than this, we break up into groups and we go through the cards and we share this and we exchange ideas, and it's fabulous in groups.
Okay, and the second question is, what about parts that you don't have that you want, like archetypes or
You probably have it.
empowering parts?
I bet you have it. You might not be. So in that case, it sounds more like a trait that you would want. You probably already have that part. It might not be doing that job anymore, but it's in there.
Like I'm thinking archetypal
Yeah.
parts.
Is it societally acceptable to have a primal part? Not really. So often those parts of ourselves that are that like base, like I just want to go out into the woods and scream, we've shoved that part down because it's not socially acceptable to stand in the middle of State Street and go, fuck! People will take you away for that. So we put that part of ourselves down. So those primal parts of ourselves, that's innate in us. I bet it's in there and is either way shoved down or it's been exiled. Because maybe as a kid you were told you're too loud, you're too big. Good girls don't act like that. Boys don't do that. Boys don't cry, whatever all that is. So you've realized, oh, I'm going to not fit in if I do that, so I'm going to shove this down. And I encourage all of you to watch this Gabor Mate thing. He talks about that shoving down the rage and shoving down the anger, because as a little kid, that's not okay. You can't start screaming in the middle of church. You get in trouble for that. That's that primal part that wants to come out. So I bet it's in there, and it might be called something different, but you have it. You just have to figure out where it went, if that makes sense.
I guess like trying on personas.
Sure. And once we know our parts, you can pick who's going to be the best for that job. I knew I couldn't take a scared part, a disorganized part into that tax audit. I had to bring, and this is Capricorn. When I talk about Capricorn, this is the gesture I make. It's hilarious. Like, you can see me shift when I go into Capricorn. Then I have sort of like the healing part that's a little more loopy. But Capricorn needed to come into that tax audit. But until you know your parts, you can't give them jobs to do. Right? You're not going to walk into a board meeting for the first time and start assigning tasks to people at this company you don't know anything about. You're going to have the CEO making copies, and the treasurer's going to be running the business, and the secretary is going to be doing taxes, and you have to know what they do first. So as you write it out and you invite those parts in, you're going to learn more about them.
And then you can have intention going into wherever you're going.
Yep.
With those. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Can I make an addition to this?
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling like what you're asking is maybe like a vision or a desired experience that you can like have sight of to some degree of your imagination, or maybe it's a felt experience that you feel connected to desire. And this is just my intuition based off of what you've shared. And so I just wanted to offer this perspective alongside what you've offered of like, maybe there's an experience you're desiring to feel, and maybe you can clarify in your journaling or in your nature walk, like what the qualities of that desired experience are. And there might be a part of you that you can activate to create that experience, or there might be a way to voice your desire to co-create that experience. And you don't have to respond to that in any way, but I just wanted to offer that too.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
About the exiles. Are they all like your wounded child parts?
Pretty much.
Like, are we creating them all the time?
So, yes and no. So everything that I've read about it and all the exiles that I've experienced are little kid parts. Now, as an adult, like I had an experience where I was in a workshop and the leader of the workshop decided to publicly shame me in front of everybody. And I felt this, I mean, my little kid came up and was terrified, and then Capricorn was like, oh, hell no. And it could have come to blows. And then later they were trying to talk to me, and I was so shut down because I'm like, dude, you hurt my little kid. That is not okay. I will not engage with you. You are dead to me. That could have been labeled as a new exile, except I know it was an old one that went, poof, oh no. It kind of came out for a second, was triggered, and then immediately hid. And all the protectors went, stay back. It's like the German Shepherd who is just trained to protect. And even though they're on the beach with the family, the dog is like, what's in the environment? I got to protect my family. That's what our protectors do. And it's fascinating when that stuff happens, because now I can look at that as, oh, I know how to access that exile. I know what triggers that exile. And I can sit in that experience, go back to that exile, asking the protector's permission, of course, because you can't get to the exile unless the protector stands back. So sometimes you have to put them in another room. You have to, I'll be right back with you. Is it okay if I do this? Tell the kid how old you are, because the exile doesn't know that we're adults now. The exiles think we're still little kids. Because when we're a little kid, we don't have the brain power, the consciousness, the anything to deal with these things. So we create these protectors to manage it for us. So to my understanding, all of our exiles are little kids.
So, with respect to that scenario,
Yep.
where, if you have intuition of that coming on, is that an adult concept, or is it coming from your warning signs of what you went back and felt as a little kid?
If I have intuition that my exile is going to be triggered, or see the protector coming on.
You talked about this situation where someone confronted you. Did you have intuition that that could happen?
Totally
So
caught me off
completely
guard.
off guard.
Totally caught me off guard. And that's so often what happens, right? We get triggered, and before we know it, we're reactive. We're yelling. We're flipping the guy off on the freeway. That triggers something in us that we have this huge reaction and then go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Why did I just do that? We've all probably had that experience where we get home and go, God, I can't believe I acted like that. That just so was not me. I can't believe that. Or we watch someone else do that. Whoa, man, Bob flew off the handle tonight. Jeez, that's crazy. Because we don't know it's coming. In the elevator with the roller derby girls, I could feel I had a choice. And when you feel you have a choice, you're in self. When you see the state coming on, oh boy, here comes that angry one, you're in self and you have a choice as to whether you let that blend with you or not. It takes practice. I kind of did it spontaneously, which was sort of surprising.
Did you use a team of protectors for the conflict resolution?
My understanding also, it's not possible to blend with more than one part simultaneously. They do this. So it was, oh, my little kid, what the hell is this guy doing? You're done. Shut down. It goes that fast, just like the whole ice cream thing.
So you compartmentalized. Okay.
It was a matter of seconds as we switch.
Okay.
I'm hungry. I want ice cream. No, you don't want ice cream. Oh, I'm going to have ice cream. We make those decisions that fast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I've got a couple questions.
yeah.
First, really quick, because you say it quickly, can you repeat the name of this movie or program that you suggest everybody should see?
Yeah,
And
so Gabor Mate. That's just his name. I'm not saying it fast.
Is there any spelling you could add to
Yeah,
that?
Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E with a little accent aigu over it. I don't remember Eric, what's the name of the movie? Yep. The Something of Trauma. We'll have that for you in a second.
Cool.
The Wisdom of Trauma.
Okay.
Thank you, dear. It's a donation basis. It has not been yet released. 2 filmmakers made this film, and it was absolutely incredible. And the illustration that is done through the movie, and it's incredible. I think they asked for like a $7 donation, and if you can, of course, give them as much as you want. And then after you've watched the movie, they have a program. Like, I just signed up for the whole all-access pass because Capricorn got a hold of it. And she's like, learn more learning. So there's movies, and there's bonuses, and there's access, and there's all this stuff. But it was probably one of the most impactful hour, 20 minutes that I've watched in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So my second question was, and I believe this was sounded more recently, that you had done these TEDx talks and had lost your father, and terribly sorry about that.
Thanks.
But you found inner strength and conquered and trucked through and are here today, champing out, talking about that. Was there anywhere in that process that you utilized psychedelics to help assist yourself in processing that trauma post-learning the experience, and then how did the psychedelics help you find those different started with an E,
Ego states?
the different ego states or the exiles
Yeah.
that cause all the chaos in those moments?
Right. So that's multiple questions. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I found ego states in the internal family systems years before I went to psychedelics. So my use of the psychedelics with the ego states is a newer process. As far as because I lost my mom very young. I lost my mom at 18 after a 9-year illness. So I lost my mom basically at like 12, essentially.
A lot of prep on that, too. That's horrible.
And then I lost my dad 6 years ago now. I have actually done a lot of grief work with psychedelics. I started experiencing grief at 8, and it has not stopped. I've lost more people statistically to suicide than anybody should. I've had people from family members to close friends to clients start dying at 8, and it just keeps on going. And in my last journey, I asked why. why does this keep happening? And the answer I got was, because you can handle it. And my question to that was, well, my ask was, then I would like more tools. And Mother Mary went, you got it, bing. So in my last couple journeys, even breathwork journeys that I've done, a lot of me processing grief has come up. Because one, we're not taught to do that in this society. And two, I've just had so much of it. And I do process it pretty quick, and I do feel like I handle it maybe not better than most people, but I think because it's been a lifetime journey for me, I process it, and it helps me help other people. I have a lot of clients who I help process grief. So the psychedelics have really helped kind of put the period at the end of that process for me. And the last psilocybin journey I had ended with both my parents, I'm going to cry, sitting in a room looking at me, young, healthy, happy, saying, you're doing exactly what your purpose was, and we're so proud of you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That truly is beautiful. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, so I have a little knowledge of IFS. What would you do if you're seeing a little child exile being created? Like I have there's some little kids in my life, and I get, the parents are, whatever, they're firefighters, whatever, and so I see this sort of happening with them. What would you do in that situation for the kid?
That is such a great question. I don't know if I have an answer that is as great as the question. My only experience with this with kids is when people work with me with coaching, they get a set of these cards. And I have clients who have kids who turn to their kids every day after school and say, how are you feeling? And the kid pulls out a card. And they are surprised, one, how insightful these kids are, because of course there's no words on the cards, right? So the kids can just look at the image and go, I felt like that today. And sometimes it was the scared kid standing on the desk with stuff being thrown at them. Or it was the kid that was bullied, or it was the kid that's hiding behind the chair, or it was the joker kind of kid. That is such a great way to start that conversation with kids. I honestly don't know, just at that age, we just don't have the resources. And somebody outside of us helping with the resources still doesn't quite solve that problem, because it's something that we have to figure out ourselves, that we have to heal ourselves. Letting them know that they have resources, letting them know that they have support, letting them know that they're loved and they're cared for and they're not judged. And if they're angry, rather than telling them to shove that anger down, give them a good way to express that anger. Something similar, I have a client right now who has a severely autistic son. The kid is now 26. He's 6'2", 197 pounds, and he's like nonverbal autistic. And he has decided that when he's frustrated, he's going to headbutt people. That is not okay for a 197 pound, 6'2" person to be doing that. And so they're working with a psychologist to let him know it is totally okay to get frustrated. It is totally okay to be angry. Here's a better way to manage that. And they're trying to give him, even in his state of not being particularly cognitively structured to do so, they're trying to give him tools to manage these emotions. So I would say if you can work with those kids and give them tools to manage those emotions, because how amazing would it have been if when we were pissed off at 6, someone sat us down and said, I totally get that you're angry. Tell me why you're angry. Let's work through that, as opposed to don't yell, don't throw things, don't break your toys. That's what I got. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. No one sat me down and talked about feelings. No one validated them. No one told me they were okay, and no one gave me tools to work with them. So if you can do that with the kids, they're going to have a leg up on this.
I'm curious about, there's so much language that's similar or in the same context. Saboteurs, which
Yes.
of the ego states?
Yes. I love doing saboteurs work with, I'm blanking on his name. That's the first thing I give my coaching clients, is I have them do the saboteur quiz. Yes, the saboteurs go hand in hand with the ego states, with the exiles. The pleaser, the controller, the hypervigilant, the hyperachiever, all of those marry perfectly with the ego states.
So they're the ones that basically were not wanted by your history of origin or your caregivers or your teachers,
those
friends.
are the ones, well, we all have at least the way I work with the saboteurs, there's 10 of them with this gentleman's book, I'm forgetting what his name is. but you sort of do this quiz and it tells you what your top saboteurs are. And they tell you where they were formed, what childhood thing got them, or what lies they tell you. Pleaser, avoider, hypervigilant, hyperachiever, controller, all of these things are some of our saboteurs. And it's not necessarily that they weren't wanted, it's they just got too big for themselves, right? I'm hyperachiever, controller, hypervigilant. What a surprise. Capricorn. Some people are, they're victim, avoider, pleaser, because they don't want that conflict. They would rather please people and avoid that. And that's just how their personality developed. But those are also ego states. And they are doing their job great.
All right, I got a two-part question for you. Are you as excited as I am for Pixar's Inside Out 2 this summer?
Yes.
Okay.
This is how it is. That movie is... that's science. Everybody should watch that movie. Yes.
Agreed. Can't wait for the sequel.
Yeah.
So much like they visualized the internal family system with these characters so flawlessly, have you personally experienced or seen clients that you've helped through psychedelic experiences visualize their internal family members in some way, the way Pixar did so eloquently? Sort
of like character
Sure.
them? Well, that's what those cards are. And that's what that woman did when she said, "Are you okay with me drawing my ego states?" And the therapist said, "Yeah." And then he looked at her drawings and went, "Holy crap, can you illustrate my book?" And now she has a whole series of cards. Because the majority of us are visual learners, 60 to 70% of us are visual, and then auditory follows that. Seeing those images, and I've had people draw their ego states. I've had people meditate on what their ego states look like. I have a very clear picture of what Capricorn looks like. It happens to kind of correspond with one of the cards. I've had people alter the cards so that they look like what they see their ego state as. So that, which most of us are visual people. And I've done that most, not necessarily with psychedelics, but with hypnosis. I'll say, put them in a chair in the room. It becomes Gestalt, right? You put them in a chair, you sit across from them, you have that conversation, you help heal them. So there's a lot of visualization that goes along with that. But visualization and hypnosis, kind of the same thing. So yeah, I've used that more in the hypnosis realm than the psychedelic realm at this point. But MDMA is a great way to get in touch with your ego states. Psilocybin, great way to do. But MDMA and internal family systems is a lot of research on that right now. Dick Schwartz even mentions it in his book. And that's one of the things I'm going to start offering. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Shirley has a question.
Well, I was just wondering, you haven't spoken, I don't think, about the conflicts between some of the ego states.
Yeah.
And that's me.
Yeah.
I'm a Pisces.
Yeah. So I normally do a whole segment on that, but for time, I didn't. So yes, so we have conflicted ego states, right? A part of me wants to go to sleep, but a part of me is up thinking. Part of me wants to ask the girl out, a part of me is scared. We have ego states in conflict all the time. And the biggest one I see amongst a lot of people is I'm thinking in the middle of the night. I'm up worrying in the middle of the night. I'm up doing my to-do list in the middle of the night. Capricorn loves at 4 o'clock in the morning when I get up to go to the bathroom to go, "Oh, while I have you, let's go over some things." And I go, "Oh, no, I've got to sleep." So what you can do is you can actually negotiate with your states. No, it's a battle. She's happy she has me. And I refer, they're hardwired. Like Capricorn's a whole person. She really is. A lot of you have met her. She's interesting. So I will negotiate with that. I'll say, "Hey, thank you so much," because they're helping. "Thank you so much for letting me know that I've got to call these 5 people back tomorrow. I so appreciate you letting me know that. I promise you that I'm going to do that first thing in the morning, but you have to let us sleep. Because if you don't let us sleep, we're going to be worthless in the morning, and then we're going to sleep too late, and we're not going to be able to get to it, and by that point, I'm asleep." You get to negotiate with that, just like I did with 14-year-old. You bring them together at a different time. You feel the trigger, it happens, you go, "Oh boy, I'm up thinking in the middle of the night again," and then the next day, you have that conversation. So my client that had 14-year-old on the couch, who wanted to sit there and not adult 7 nights a week, that's not healthy. She can't do that. So we had to negotiate with that 14-year-old, well, what is going to work for you? What if one night a week you get whatever movie you want, you get whatever wine you want, you get every blah, 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 so that the rest of the time, you get to negotiate it, just like you would with a couple. I do a lot of negotiating with my couples. So it's the same kind of thing. That's a great question. I normally do a whole part on that, yeah. Yes?
Do you ever get to a place where all these fucking people are out of your head? Just seems like really tiring.
No.
All these exiles all the time.
Well,
checking in.
No, because they're not going to go anywhere. You can't get rid of them. Now, what happens...
That's not the release. They're gone.
Well, so I always thought, when I first started doing this work, I'm like, oh, I have a shameful exile, I have a scared exile, I thought I had like 5 exiles. No problem. No. There's sort of I don't want to say unlimited amount. I don't know anybody that's released them all. Because, like I said the other night, I had this chastised exile. I didn't even know I had that one. When I did a small bit of MDMA and I went and did my own sort of journey mapping states, I had a kid in a box in my basement. I didn't know I had a kid in the box in my basement. I had no clue that kid was there. Something triggers it, and then you go, oh, that's there now. Then you get to figure out what's covering it. So, I mean, every time that I've gone back and found an exile, it's sort of event specific. So there was an event where my grandfather, who was a very, very angry man, actually hit me when I was a little kid, spanked me. And I turned to my mom and she went, because she was abused by him. That was her father. So that created sort of this dual exile of I hate my grandfather because he hit me and my mom abandoned me in that moment. And when I healed that exile disappeared, but there's still other exiles from other things. And you kind of have to systematically go through and go, all right, whose turn is it now? And sometimes you don't know they're there. They're so hidden away. I didn't know I had such, when the guy chastised me in the middle of this group, I didn't realize I had such a strong reaction to that. My hurt kid came out so hard and fast, and then immediately got sucked in, and the protectors came out. I didn't expect that. I didn't know that was going to happen. So you can keep unburdening exiles. You can keep reassigning your protectors. Will you get to an end point? Let me know.
What's the sort of the stage when these exiles are being formed?
Yeah, up until like 18, 19 years old. I actually had an exile formed from a really horrible boyfriend probably when I was 20. It wasn't an abusive situation, but it was a very shameful, horribly embarrassing situation. And I didn't necessarily realize that was an exile until I started working with someone and she goes, that's an exile. And I went, oh, I thought it was just a shitty experience. But it stuck with me and it held charge. And I think that's what it is. The exiles are holding charge. And when you can drain that battery and they don't affect you in that way, then the protectors don't have to be so on guard and the whole system relaxes. Then you start to blend everything, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you, everybody, for those questions. That was really lovely. And yeah, I was wanting to mention that too. It's like when we hold that self-relationship in relationship to all of these aspects that is compassionate and curious, it's not any longer exhausting for all of these different narratives and voices to exist within us.
Yeah. I was just going to say, so when you're in self, which is our goal, you see the states come and go and you don't react to it. You're like, oh, here comes the angry one, and you get to choose what you do. Do you scream at the guy in the freeway, or do you go, oh, here comes my angry one? Nah, I'm not going to be angry. You get to a point where you get to choose what you do. And that's the joy of this. I mean, I am so much I still have my moments, but I'm so much less reactive to things. Because I've sort of made friends with all these parts, I can see it coming on, and I don't have to let it overtake me. I mean, remember the first couple times you went back to see your parents as an adult? Did you not become an 8-year-old? But that's one of the biggest things. Like, God, I get back with my parents and I feel like a 6-year-old again. Of course you do. You're going back to that ego state. So yeah, it is that awareness, and then you get to make a choice.
I'm working with that piece right now. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, Kathy, all that you have. And I have a couple more questions to ask you. We have a series of questions that we ask each guest. Yep. And so the one that is feeling most right for me to ask you first, based off of what you shared with your psilocybin vision of your parents, is how do you describe an afterlife, if that is something in your framework of reality? Yeah, so I was raised Catholic. That did not fit my method of belief. So I'm actually, from all the research and the experience I've had, I'm a firm believer in past lives and reincarnation. I kind of equate it to school. So we have this little lesson thing here, and then we die. We go to that in-between place where we meet with our guidance counselor, and we review everything we did, and we get handed here's your next classes, and you go, oh, I'm going to work on, let's deal with this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Who would you like to be this time? I'm going to be a white woman in the States. Great, let's do that. And then you pick your family, and you pick your stuff. I mean, I think there's so much choice involved, and then we land on this planet again, completely ignorant of all those choices. And then we hate our parents, but we picked them to learn these lessons. I think we travel with the same core group of people over and over again.
It's like kind of like community theater, because you know how it works, right? Except in this play, you're the ingenue and you're the villain, and I don't have a role for you, so you're going to direct and you're going to be the stage manager, and I'm going to do lighting. And then the summer ends, we come back, and next we're doing Treasure Island, and it's all men, and you guys are men this time. And to me, the reincarnation aspect just explains so much of things. It explains so much of life, of our skills, of our sexual preference, of our preference of who we're with as a partner, of what we want to do for a living. I've done so much research into that. And I've been playing with past lives since high school. I was that kid when everyone else was partying in college, and I was regressing people in my dorm room. It's like Capricorn. So yeah, it's just that's sort of what I believe happens. And then eventually we get to the point where we've learned everything we can, and we ascend past that. And I don't know what that looks like. Angels, guides, masters, I don't know.
Beyond this earth realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I totally resonate.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, like, would that mean to you that this experience and this incarnation is like a simulation?
Ooh, that's so Matrix. I've never thought of it like a simulation. I just recognize that I'm going to see everybody again. I mean, I've done so many reincarnations where I look across the table and I go, oh my God, that's my dad. Or, oh my, I recognize that I see these people again. And it makes death less scary and terrifying. It makes the loss not seem as lossful. Because, at some point you're connected with them. And my dad is with me all the time. I mean, he pops in, he's telling me jokes, he's making smart-ass comments. I'm like, okay, Dad, I know, yeah. Our address growing up was 812. And I grew up in that house, and he was in that house until he passed, and I had to sell the house back in Pittsburgh. But it's like, inevitably, I am having a conversation, I'll look at the clock, it's 8:12. Is it 8:12 right now? Oh, shit. Okay, so in a minute, my dad's going to be here if you have any questions. But or my change will be 8:12, or I'll be watching a video and I'll pause it and it'll be 8 minutes and 12 seconds left. It's just this reminder, some people look at that as 11:11, or, but it's like 8:12 is like, that's the number. And if it wouldn't look weird, I'd probably get a tattoo of 8:12 someplace. But I recognize there's things that we don't understand with these brains, and there's dimensions out there, I believe, that are happening simultaneous as this. And I find comfort in that. And somebody said, well, what if it's not true? And I went, I'll be dead. So if I die and it's not true, no skin off my nose, but if it makes me feel better living this life, and it makes me kinder and more compassionate because I recognize all of you, then I'm not going to be a dick. Can I say dick? Yeah. Great. I don't know. It's just a neat way to live. It works for me, and I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that which you just said, like that it works for you and is supportive to you, is true with the internal family systems. Like, it's a model that really resonated, and people may hear it and feel overwhelmed, and it may not be it for them right now, and that's okay.
That's
and
totally
you're
okay.
here just like being true to you and what has been supportive on your pathway, and sharing it with those who are embodying enough curiosity to hear you share your passion. And I really have appreciated you sharing with us tonight. And yeah, I just want to thank you for coming back to the District House. And I know you have so many ongoing projects and things happening, including your new psychedelic preparation journey and integration coaching offerings. And so I just wanted to give you space to share more about how people can connect and work with you if of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's with or without psychedelics, doing internal family systems or life coaching, couples coaching. I'm here in town. I'm up Upper State Street. I can throw a rock and hit Bevmo. So I'm centrally located. And yeah, I do one-on-one coaching and couples, hypnosis, and workshops, groups, that sort of thing. It's just kathygruver.coach, and I've got some cards up there for anybody that wants to. Yeah, so I have, you can see on my website what I do and what I offer, and I love coaching. It's just come so naturally for me. Even as a little kid, people would plop down next to me and tell me their problems, and I'm like, I'm 10. I don't think I can help you with your marriage, but I'll do my best. I'm that person, so I love doing it. So yeah.
Thank you. We'll connect with Kathy if you're interested, and I want to invite everyone to come back again next week. Same place, same time. You know where to find me. Jacob will be here too.
Thank you for having me.